All right, everybody, here's what we're going to do. Breaks are for wimps. We're skipping the break. Powering through. Keep us in the realm of on time here. So we're going to next jump into a quick video from our Diamond sponsor Vehicle. And then we're going to be on to the main event with Taylor, who's going to go over Laravel 8 and other goodies. So let's try this. 1 second. This is something new we've never done before. It's very possible it could break. Let's see how it goes. Share the sound. Okay. I think you should be seeing Firefox. And hopefully you're still seeing this. Looks like you are. Go ahead.
Vehicle strives to be the best Laravel development team in the world. We're a Canadian dev shop located in Southern Ontario, specializing in Laravel, Vue, and other JavaScript frameworks. Our 50-person dev team works with other tech firms to help them build exceptional web and mobile applications. We act as an extension of our clients' team, working with them to ship clean, maintainable code. Our goal is to make you look like a superstar to your stakeholders. Here's how we deliver on that promise. Our foundational values are caring and growth. We seek to provide a caring environment that enables our team to focus on growth. This in turn allows us to deliver for our clients. We are one team with our clients and we share in their successes. We take pride in our strategic work mindset, adapting agile practices to get the job done. Our normal engagements consist of 2 dedicated developers working week in, week out as a direct extension of your internal team. So, what does working with us look like? We have daily Slack communication with your team. We collaborate with you on weekly or bi-weekly sprint planning. We provide demos and retrospectives at the end of each sprint. We work with your team to have collaborative PR reviews. We have daily mobbing sessions and pair programming to ensure we ship high-quality code. Overall, we work as an integrated part of your team. Our goal is to make you look like a superstar. We love giving back to the tech community, so if you'd like to know more about us, be sure to check out our podcast where we talk about Laravel, Vue, and the many other technologies that we use. We organize Laravel, PHP, and JavaScript group meetups in our community. Find us on Meetup. Also be sure to attend conferences. We usually bring our entire team to Laracon. But enough about us. We want to learn about you. We would love to have a conversation and learn about what you've been working on. Feel free to reach out and connect with us using this link or by clicking the button after the video. You'll also get a chance to win your choice of an iPhone 11 Pro or a Google Pixel 4 and get a Vehicle t-shirt. We also wanted to mention a big thank you to everyone who helped organize Laracon Online this year. You can visit our website at www.vehicle.com or send an email to go@vehicle.com. We look forward to hearing from you, and thank you so much for watching.
Okay. I'm back. It worked. Thank you, Vehicle. Really appreciate all your support with the transition to moving this online. It's been really great. So definitely check out Vehicle. Check them out in Digital Swag for the contest and all that sort of information. All right. Let me see here. Make sure everything's good. Okay. Okay, we're going to bring Taylor in now. There he is.
What's up?
What's going on?
Chilling, watching Laracon with the people, the rest of the people.
Just like everybody else. All right, man. Well, I'm going to let you take it away since you have a double block. So you're going to have an hour of Taylor going through everything new in Laravel. There's a ton to cover. So take it away.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to Laracon Online Summer Edition. Little bummed we couldn't all be together in Atlanta, but this is a really cool way, actually, to just extend Laracon to a lot of people around the world that wouldn't normally get to come and see all the big announcements that I usually make at your typical summer Laracon event. Thanks to Ian and Eric for helping organize the event, and thanks to all the sponsors that have made it possible, and thanks to you for attending. So like Ian said, I'm going to use this talk to sort of give you a overview and dive into some of the cool new stuff in Laravel 8. If you've listened to the Laravel snippet, which is a little podcast I've done in the past, which I've been kind of taking a break from, I've mentioned that in 2020, I was focusing a lot on open source, which has really been the case as the year's gone on. I spent a lot of time working on our open source packages, working on Laravel 8 itself, working on some new open source packages, which I want to show you today. And it's been a really fun time. It's been probably one of the most enjoyable years of working on Laravel so far. Just to, I didn't have like a big kind of commercial product hanging over my head like last year when I was trying to launch Laravel Vapor. That really sucked all my attention away for the better part of the year. And I've just been focusing on kind of the old school stuff I used to work on, Laravel itself. And Laravel 8 is coming up for release. We're planning to release that on September 8th, which is not next week, but the week after. And it has a lot of cool goodies. So just kind of starting from the beginning, and then we'll walk through some code examples. This is kind of the new landing page for Laravel 8. And it's kind of been redesigned. And I went ahead and made it dark mode ready. So if I toggle dark mode here, we've got a fresh dark mode landing page. Just some of the little details, that we try to make fun in the Laravel world. And of course, a link to the new Laravel shop down there in the bottom left. This has been rebuilt with Tailwind and some Tailwind UI inspiration. All right. And so the first thing I want to show you is not really a code example, but something I tweeted about last week is that Laravel 8 now includes a models directory in the app folder. So if I pop open that app folder, you can see there's a new models directory there. This got a huge reaction. It was probably my most popular tweet ever on Twitter. I think it had over 3,000 likes. I'd run a poll a few months ago to ask, what are people using? Are they putting their models in the app directory, which is kind of the default structure, or are they using the app models directory? And over 80% actually were using the app models or creating their own app models directory in Laravel 7 and in Laravel 5 and whatever other version you're using. So I decided to go ahead and make this a default. It seems to be really popular with the community. And, so hopefully you enjoy that. The nice thing is actually, like, if I were to, of course, do make model on the command line, Artisan make model, conference, it will, of course, put it in that directory. Now, the cool thing is, I'll get back out that change. Like if I were to delete this directory, say you don't like the models directory for whatever reason. So now I'm kind of back to the no models directory, and I do the same thing. It will just stick it in app. And all of the other commands that have to do with model generation, like even that are sort of indirectly related, like say you create a migration and then you use the -m flag, or you make a controller and you use the dash or the resource stuff, or you create a model with it, it will actually kind of follow the same convention. So it will look to see, does this app have a models directory? If it does, it will use that to put your models. If it doesn't, it will just put them in the app directory, which is kind of what we did in previous releases of Laravel. All right, so I'll back out that change. So we're back to our model directory, and I get rid of this little conference model. All right, so everything works pretty seamlessly, even if you don't like having a models directory. And of course, if you're upgrading from Laravel 7 to 8, this is totally irrelevant to you. You don't have to make a models directory. Everything just sort of works as normal. Because Laravel under the hood actually doesn't care where your models live at all. You could put them in any random directory you wanted to, as long as sort of, your auth config where you configure your models is going to match where your user model is. That's really how Laravel knows which model to use. All right, so that is the models directory in Laravel 8. Moving on, another slight change to the default structure is a configuration option that everyone was affected by, but maybe you didn't know where it came from. And when you're building apps in Laravel 6 or 7, and you do something like this, welcome controller at index maybe, there is a property in route service provider called namespace. It's not here in Laravel 8, and it was set to app HTTP controllers such that when you did this, under the hood, Laravel would automatically kind of prefix it like this. And so the one hangup with that was if you tried to use this callable syntax for your controllers, Laravel would still add the prefix on front of this. So now it would be like double prefixed. It would be like app HTTP controllers, welcome controller, I don't know, or double prefix like this, two leading prefixes, which was a hassle. And then you had to go delete that property, and it wasn't very well documented or well known how that worked. So in Laravel 8, we just trashed that namespace property by default. And now you can just you can import your controller classes, which is something you might have seen like Frake or Spotsy recommend. And this all works fine. There's no like magical prefixing on the controller. So if I hit this welcome route, we'll just hit that welcome controller and everything works as you would expect. And of course, this also works for like if you have invocable controllers. So if I look at this welcome controller, there's that index method we just called, but I also just have an invoke method on here. Like if you have a single action controller, you can just leave off. You can leave off the method entirely and just pass the class name. So now if I hit this, you can see that I've hit the invoke method. So again, this is something that if you're on Laravel 7 right now and you're upgrading to Laravel 8, you're still going to have the property in your route service provider because it's sort of in the app skeleton. It's not in the framework. So this is something that is, again, not going to affect you during upgrade. If you want to remove that manually, you could just go into your route service provider and remove it. But this is really something that only would affect new Laravel 8 applications that you create after Laravel 8 is released. And of course, if you want to bring the namespace back and maintain the Laravel 7 and previous behavior, you can just add that back to your route service provider if you want to. All right, so route caching has been improved. Route caching basically takes all of your routes and compiles them into a big PHP array that's really more efficient for us to deal with, so that when your routes are cached, we actually don't even load this routes file at all. We just load the route cache file, and it doesn't have to like re-register each route individually. Now, one downside to that is if you had even one route, like this route, let's say, that had a closure as its action, you could not use route caching at all. It would throw an error that we can't serialize the closure, and you would have to basically convert every single route in the entire application. Even if like a package exposed a route that used a closure, that would break your route caching. You would have to convert every route to use a controller and sort of a string action pointing to that controller. And Laravel 8, you can now cache your routes even if you have closures for your route. So like, for example, if I come in here and do route cache, you can see that I don't get any errors at all. And I should just be able to hit my routes as normal. So that's really nice. I mean, sometimes I have route caching, or I try to use route caching, but like I have my routes API file still just has the default API route that I forgot to delete, and I'll get the error and I have to go delete that route or convert it to a controller, and it's just a hassle. Now you no longer have to worry about that at all. You can just always cache your routes, even if you're using closures. All right, so that is the improvements to route caching. Another quick improvement I wanted to mention that Dries and I worked on is component attribution, especially around nested components. So sometimes you might have a component, which this would be really common, like if you're working with Vue, say you have a button component and then you have another button that sort of extends that button component, like a danger button, maybe like it has a red background by default. And so what it might look like is like if I have a button blade component here, and this is just an inline one, a very basic component that just echoes the extra attributes out here on the button tag, has a slot. And then if I wanted to extend that, I might make a danger button. Now, and this just merges a default class called BG Red onto the button. Now, this all looks really straightforward, but in Laravel 7, this actually wasn't possible. You couldn't have this sort of nested attributes where you pass down the attributes from the parent component down to the, or from the child component down to the parent component. it wouldn't compile right, and you couldn't really build these sort of extended components like this. But in Laravel 8, all of that has been fixed, and you can now pass down attributes sort of down this component tree to build these sort of extensible components where you have a base button and then maybe have a few other types of button that sort of extend that base button component. Hopefully that makes sense. This just wasn't possible in previous releases of Laravel, and it's a really common use case. So I'm glad we were able to get this cleaned up in Laravel 8. And if you use Blade components and Livewire and stuff like that, this will probably be a really helpful improvement. All right, some minor improvements to event listening. So this is some kind of basic stuff, but in previous releases of Laravel, if you were to try to register an event listener, you had to specify the class name first, like class or conference scheduled class function, and then you might type in it here, event, and then you could handle the event, whatever here. So we've cleaned this up in Laravel 8, where this still works, actually. This syntax is still fine, but we thought it would be cool if you could just, we know which event you want to listen to just based on the callable type hint. And so this is kind of one pattern we've been implementing in a few different places in Laravel, like the test fakes allow this pattern. If you just give us a closure in event listen, we'll just read what event you want to listen to straight from there. So you don't really have to repeat yourself anymore. So right here, I can just say event listen, callback. This is, in this case, just a single line closure. Listen for the conference scheduled event, and then log out the class name of the event. Or in the long form closure syntax, it would look something like this: listen for that conference scheduled event and log out the class name of the event. And here I can just dispatch the event. Let me clear out my log. But if we hit this route, we should see basically 2 log entries for this event, one here and then one up there. And let's hit that events route. And if we check our log, we can see we got 2, we captured 2 fired events, or one event, but we logged it 2 times because we had 2 listeners. So just a small little syntax improvement, life improvement. If you're registering event listeners, I think it just looks a little cleaner. You no longer have to repeat the class name in the listener declaration. All right, so moving on, I wanted to show you another new event feature, which is Queueable Anonymous Event Listeners, kind of a mouthful. So it's really better seen in like a model example, which is what I've done here. So I have this user model, and that's not the user model, that's the user factory. I have this user model, and a really common pattern I see in Laravel apps, people will register these sort of event callbacks in the booting method of the model. And when you register an event callback like this and you're using a closure, in previous releases of Laravel, there was no way to make that a queued event. Like if I were just doing this and passing the closure, that would always just execute synchronously when the model was created. But in Laravel 8, we've actually introduced the very first namespaced function in Laravel. You can see I've got use function, illuminate events, queueable. And if I use the queueable function to wrap this closure, it will actually create a queued anonymous event listener. I have to talk slow to get that all out right. And that will actually execute on the queue in the background. And in this case, we're just going to queue out or write out to the log queued and then the name of the user. So it's really handy and really easy to just make this anonymous event listener and then just throw it out to the queue. And previously you would have had to make like an event class, an event listener class, and then mark that event listener class as should queue with a should queue interface, and it would be kind of in a separate file. But now if you have a quick thing you want to do on the queue, you can just do it right here in line. And I'll kind of show you what that looks like. Let me queue that, or get rid of that log. So if we hit this queueable route, we created that user using the factory, and we should have a job out on the queue. So if I go out here and run my little queue command, you can see that we ran a job called invoke queued closure, which is sort of a built-in Laravel job. And if we look out there at our log, you can see we logged out the name of the user. So really kind of cool way, a slick way to just have an anonymous queueable event listener. I think it's really useful in this particular context, like I mentioned, where you're registering these model event callbacks, and a lot of people make these closures actually instead of full event listener classes. So really comes in handy right here. All right, so that is Queueable anonymous event listeners. Maintenance mode. There has been some pretty big improvements to the PHP Artisan down command, which some people use and some people don't. But there's some cool new features here I want to show you. And in previous releases of Laravel, if you're using the down command and you wanted to allow some people to still access the application, the only really way we had built in to do that was this IP whitelisting feature that I found complicated and just annoying to use. You have people spread out like all over the world working on the app. Sometimes they're using VPNs, sometimes they're behind corporate VPNs. And it's just annoying to have to maintain an IP whitelist for that kind of situation. So in Laravel 8, you can use a new secret feature of Artisan down. So let me show you what I mean. So if I go ahead and put this application, let me close out that queue worker. If I do Artisan down, just the normal old, no other options, standard maintenance mode. And now if I try to hit this, you'll see that I get 503 service unavailable message. So this application is down, it's in maintenance mode. If I try to hit any other routes, I get basically the same message. All right, so let me show you how the secret stuff works. So I'll bring the app back up. And let's make sure it's up. So it's up. So I do Artisan down, secret, Laracon 2020. All right, so now the application is down. I can't access it, but I can access this token or the secret as a route. So Laracon-2020 or whatever you want it to be. It could be some really long random string that you generate. And now if I hit this route, now I can start accessing the application, and I have this secret cookie that I've been issued that is valid for several hours that lets me access this application even while it's in maintenance mode. And so if I try to hit some other route, you see I don't get the service unavailable. I actually hit the real 404 and not found error. And I can access any other route in the application. So it's a really easy way to, like, if you want to put your application out there, put it in maintenance mode, but you want to maybe let some client look at it or your other team members be able to access it. Or even if you're doing some pretty complicated deployment infrastructure change and you need to put the application in maintenance mode for a few minutes, but you want to log in and verify that everything is working, this is a really good way to kind of give yourself a backdoor through the maintenance mode to make sure that the application is functioning correctly. Another big improvement to the down command is the ability to pre-render a page. So basically the need for this came from, if you're deploying an application and say at the very beginning of your deployment script, you run PHP Artisan down, and then you run Composer install or Composer update, you can still your application can still throw errors to the end user while Composer is installing the dependencies, messing with the vendor directory, rewriting the autoload files, and that can cause your end users to get error messages. So what I really wanted to do was give the ability to pre-render an error page that's just rendered before anything in the framework happens. We don't even load Composer. We don't do anything. So you can now do that using this render option. So I can pass it any view that I want. In this case, like errors 503, put the application in maintenance mode, and I get the same view and it looks all the same. But if I actually go in here to the file system and dig around, I'll show you. What it actually did is there is a new, in the storage directory under framework, there's a new maintenance.php. And this file was generated when I ran that down command to render the page that is pre-rendered without doing anything else. And so if I look in my index.php where the application would normally come into at the very beginning of the request, you can see the new very first thing it does is check right here. Do we have a maintenance.php file? And if we do, we'll just require that file. And it would never go beyond this. So we would never register the autoloader or anything like that. So it's a lot safer. You can't really throw errors to the end user when you're using this. And it's all pre-rendered and ready to go. All right. So I'm going to bring the app back up. Artisan up. And I'm going to skip down to this example right here. This is kind of combining all of the new options. So let's say, for example, you wanted to put an application out onto a Forge server or something like that, and then you're going to have like a marketing page that says coming soon, some new application you're hacking on, and you still want to give yourself a backdoor to use the application while you're building it, even in production. You can combine all these new options to do something like that. So basically what I could do is say something like Artisan down, render the welcome view, which might be my marketing page, redirect all other views to that marketing page with use a status 200 for that page instead of like a 503, and then give myself a secret of, I don't know, let's do Taylor this time. Put that down. Now we've got our marketing page sort of pre-rendered, just a standard 200 OK status code. If I try to hit any other routes, I should get redirected to this page. So we're kind of redirecting everything here to the marketing page. But then if I use the Taylor secret, now I should be allowed to access other routes. So you can see I can access the other routes of the application now. So this is a good way to put an application out there sort of in demo mode or marketing mode before it launches, and still give yourself that backdoor to work on the application. All right, so I'm going to bring that back up. Head back to this main page. And that's a good overview of kind of the new features of maintenance mode. I have to say, when I started working on Laravel 8, I didn't expect to write this new stuff for the down command, but it was just one of those things that has bugged me for years about Laravel, where I knew that the down command was just kind of, blah. Like it had all these kind of downsides to it that I didn't really like. And I don't like having anything like that in the framework. I like everything to be as good as it can be so that I can kind of sleep peacefully at night. So I wanted to make these improvements, and I'm glad we're finally able to make this command feel pretty useful and pretty robust. All right, moving past that, there is a new catch method when you queue an anonymous function. So Laravel has a pretty robust queue system, as you might know, and you can queue anonymous functions straight onto the queue without making a job class or anything. Like in this example, I am throwing this function out onto the queue. It will get serialized and then executed in the background. But in previous releases of Laravel, there was no real way to handle failures for these jobs. So like if one of them threw an exception, it would go to your failed jobs table, but there was no way to sort of attach code in here to what should happen if the job fails. And by fail, I don't mean necessarily the first time the exception gets thrown, but like if you have a queue retry of like 3, the job gets tried 3 times and then it fails and goes to the failed jobs table. This catch method lets you register a callback that will be called when the job is failing. So it's actually been tried 3 times. It's about to be added to the failed jobs table, just like the failed method on a standard job class. So that is now possible in Laravel 8. We can do this with this new catch method. So let me clear out that log file. So basically, if I hit this queue catch route, that's going to go out to the queue. We can start up a worker. And you can see it failed after attempting to process. We're going to have some log messages. There's some second attempt. And you can see there's when it's about to fail. It failed that 3rd attempt. And we caught that caught exception log. That corresponds right here to that info line on line 113. So it hit our catch callback, and then it logged the regular exception through the exception handler. And then it went to the failed jobs table. So if you're using these queueable closures for just really quick little stuff you want to throw out on the queue, but you still want to have some failed job handling, maybe you need to clean something up if the job fails, you can use this catch method now to have a really slick way to have an anonymous function to handle that for you. All right. So exponential backoffs. This is a feature that Mohammed worked on to make exponential backoffs on job failures a little easier to implement. Maybe to make them implementable at all. I'm not sure if they were possible. It was probably kind of gnarly and kind of hacky to implement them before. So it's really simple to use. So I have this back off job class that I've created. And in this back off method, which this used to be called the retry after method, I believe, or maybe the delay method, but in Laravel 8, it's called back off. And you can just return an array of integers. And so like after the first failure, it'll wait 1 second. And then after the second failure, it will wait 5 seconds. And then it will attempt it for the last time. So it makes it really easy. Like if your queue job maybe interacts with an API and maybe you've hit the rate limits, or for some other reason you want to use a more exponential back off strategy instead of just, always waiting 3 seconds to retry every single time. You could do something like, wait 1 second, then 5 seconds, then 10 seconds, then 60 seconds, as many times as you want, or maybe even make this dynamic where it dynamically generates the array to, you get what I'm saying, kind of exponentially back off your retries. So I'll show you an example of how this works. If we go to the back off method, we can throw this back off job onto the queue. Back off, that is dispatched. And then let's just kind of watch this queue output. All right, so it failed. And if we look at the times here, you can see there's that first attempt, and then it attempted it again just 1 second later. But then you can see it attempted it for the last time 5 seconds after that, just like our back off settings indicated. And then, of course, it failed and went to the failed jobs table. So really simple to implement this. We didn't have to do any gnarly hacking in our handle method or whatever else. Just return an array of integers, and those backoffs will be used. All right, so really nice feature from Mohammed there. And again, another highly requested feature actually on like something like Stack Overflow. Sometimes we go to Stack Overflow to see what are people struggling with, what doesn't make sense in the framework. This particular thing was something people were asking about quite a bit, and there wasn't a super elegant solution to it out of the box. So I'm glad we're able to ship that here in a couple of weeks with Laravel 8. Job batching. This is a pretty big feature that Mohammed and I both kind of worked on and co-wrote. This is modeled after Sidekick's job batching. Sidekick is a Ruby library that's used with Rails a lot for job queuing, job management. And this is a really powerful feature that actually, it has a lot of robustness. I'll try to show you quickly. But basically the use case is you want to queue a bunch of jobs that all execute at the exact same time. And you want to be able to have these callbacks for when it's finished. So imagine someone uploads some big CSV to your application that's hundreds of thousands of rows, and you want to sort of chunk them out because maybe the rows can be processed independently. Maybe you're importing contacts or something from a CSV, and it doesn't really matter what order the rows are processed in or anything like that. Maybe you want each job to process like 10,000 rows or 50,000 rows or whatever, and then execute them all concurrently so you can process a CSV 10 or 100 or whatever, how many times faster than you normally would. Job batching makes this really easy. And then it makes it easy to be notified when all of the jobs have been completed. And not only when they've been completed, but when they've been completed in various states. So for example, like this then callback is executed when all jobs have completed successfully. So every job was successful. There were no failures at all. This catch callback is fired when the first job fails. So the first job failure occurrence in the batch. And you can do various things in here. You could cancel the batch and then I'll show you can inspect that from a batch job. You could, clean up some data, issue some alert to the user, create some error, whatever you needed to do. This finally method, similar to like try, catch, and finally, this is executed when the batch is finished executing. So there could have been errors. You can check that using this batch object. So like this batch object that's built into Laravel has all sorts of method on it, like, has failures, what the progress is of the batch. And I'll show you some of that here in a second. You can cancel the batch, determine if it's canceled, delete the batch, do all kinds of things off that batch object, which of course will be documented when Laravel is released. All right, so maybe the best way to show you this is to kind of just walk through it and actually run some batches and take a look at it. Let me go ahead and stop that queue worker. And if we hit this batch method, what's going to happen is we're going to fire off 5 of these batch jobs. So let's hop into there. These use a new batchable trait. You can see right here on the job, which what that does is give you access to this batch. And that gives you an instance of the current batch that's executing. So I can check if it's canceled, and maybe if this batch is canceled, I'll just bail out of this job. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and execute and just log out batch job executing. All right, so if I go to this log file, clear it out, let's go ahead and just run this and see what happens. So I'll go to the batch route, and let's go ahead and pop open Table Plus. I'm using the database queue driver. You can see there's a new job batches database table that has a UUID for the batch and some information about the batch, like the total jobs, the pending jobs, failed jobs, which jobs failed, stuff like that, and some timestamps based on when it finished. And then I have my normal jobs table, which has the 5 jobs that we just put in the batch. All right, so let's go ahead and run our queue worker like normal. All those batch jobs processed. If we look in our log, you can see 5 entries for the batch jobs, and then there's all jobs completed successfully, which that corresponds to our then callback. So that got executed, and this got executed in the background, of course. And then there's the batch is finished executing, which corresponds to the finally method, which that is called no matter if all jobs were successful or not. All right, so that's kind of job batching, and let's take a look at what happens if we have a job that fails. So I actually wrote a failing job class, which is also batchable, and all it does is throw an exception just to kind of force itself to fail. All right, so I'm going to add that like right here, second in line. I will restart this queue worker. Let's go ahead and throw it out onto the queue. Before I restart that, why don't I clear my log so we can see things a bit better. Start the queue worker. You can see there's a failure down there. Let's go ahead and take a look at this table. So you can see on this one, it still has 1 pending job, 1 failed job, the failed job ID, which I could retry that job. And so if I go to my log, batch job executing, there's some errors, batch job executing. You can see there's the first batch job failure detected. So that's our catch callback on the batch. And then our finally callback, the batch is finished executing. So you can see those callbacks are getting called just fine. All right, so that is job batching and how kind of successes and failures work and all of that good stuff. Now there's another kind of robust feature of job batching that I want to show you that lets you handle a lot of jobs really quickly or fans them out more effectively. So let's pretend like maybe you have thousands of jobs that you need to batch, and it's not really efficient for you to batch them all right here in the route during the web request. Maybe it takes too long, depending on your queue driver, or it just, it takes a few seconds to get all those queued. What you can actually do, this is a strategy that you can use to make this quicker. So you could have a smaller number of jobs. In this case, I have 5. I'm calling these bulk jobs. And within the bulk job, this is batchable, of course. If it's canceled, I bail out. I can add to the batch from within a batched job. So you can only add to an existing batch from within another job within that same batch. Okay, so right here, I'm going to add 1,000 more jobs onto the batch from within this job. So you might imagine, this goes back to that big sort of CSV use case. You might fire off a few jobs at the start, which then load up thousands of more jobs into the batch in the background, because maybe that takes a few seconds and you don't want to do it during the web request. This is sort of giving you an example of what that might look like. All right. So what we're going to do is, I'm not going to start my queue worker yet because I want to show you something while I do this. Let's go ahead and hit this bulk route and sort of get these jobs, these first 5 jobs out there. I'm going to look at my job batches table, and I'm going to grab that UUID real quick for that batch. And so what I want to show you is, maybe let's pretend you're building this sort of big upload CSV processing thing that we've mentioned, and you're going to show your progress in real time as you're churning through this batch. So what you can actually do is just return a batch directly from a route using this bus find batch method. Let me update the UUID. All right, so I'm going to return this from a route. And you can see you get this nice JSON structure of sort of information about the batch. So you can see right now the total jobs, the pending jobs, the progress percent, which is 0% right now, and of course that timestamp information. And now let's go ahead and start this queue worker. So you've got lots of jobs out here running, and hit this route again. Now you can see, pending jobs 4490, pending jobs 3877. We're 23% through the batch. Refresh, we're 36% completed, 44% completed. You can see my process jobs is increasing, 55% completed. And so you can imagine setting this up in, Inertia or Livewire to sort of pull and increment your status bar. 72% completed through the batch, 88, 93, 96. And now we're 100% done. The batch has been marked as finished. So you can see how you can add thousands of jobs into a batch using this strategy of just queuing a few dozen jobs during the web request and having each of those jobs load thousands of more jobs into the batch, and then monitor the progress by returning the batch from a route. You can build really cool or queue systems that way that handle really big chunks of data. All right. And then, of course, you can use these callbacks to sort of do things when they're done. Maybe when the batch is done, you want to send out an email or something like that to let them know that all their stuff's been imported. All right. So that is sort of a high-level overview of job batching, a really cool new feature in the queue system, and something I'm really proud of in Laravel, because in other ecosystems, the solutions to do this job batching stuff, these are commercial solutions. That costs money. But in Laravel, we're shipping this for free. Really powerful queue features, probably the most robust queue system in PHP. And this is a really powerful new addition that Mohammed did a good job prototyping for us and then helping me finish out to get it in Laravel 8. All right, so that is job batching. Rate limiting has been greatly improved, I would say, in Laravel 8 without any breaking changes. Really, you can still use all the same old rate limiting stuff, but we've sort of augmented it with some new stuff that I want to show you based on some discussions with Jonathan Rennig, who presented before Jeffrey. I think we've got some good new features here that you'll like. So let me show you how it's defined. So there's a new way to define rate limiting or sort of rate limiters, you might say. So in my route service provider, I've actually created this method called configure rate limits. This is not a method that's built in. You can name it whatever you want or put this wherever you want, but I thought this made sense. So in configure rate limits, there's a new rate limiter facade where I'm defining sort of almost like, it feels similar to authorization gates, like these callbacks that serve as rate limiters. And then I give them names. So just like auth gates. So here's kind of a global rate limiter that I might use for my entire application. And then I have this really fluent interface where I just have an anonymous function that returns a limit. And it has this sort of this fluent builder syntax to it. So in this case, I'm saying rate limiter just called global, and then I'm returning a limit per minute of 100. And so what that looks like to assign is back here on this route, you can see I have the throttle middleware, which you're used to. And then instead of passing integers to it for like, the maximum amount of hits and the decay period, I can just pass it a name. And in this case, it will use the named rate limiter configuration global, and then it will know what to do based on how we defined it in that callback. So every route within this group is limited to 100 requests per minute. And that is not segregated by user. It's just in general, these routes can only be hit 100 times a minute based on all users. All right, so maybe you would use a rate limiter like this on your login route as some sort of sanity check. Like, we never expect more than 500 logins a minute. If there's more than 500 logins a minute, that's malicious behavior, and we should start locking it down, regardless of the email addresses people are putting in. All right, so I'll put this back to 100. And then I can define other rate limits, and they can be more complicated. I get the request in this callback, so I can do even checks within the callback to determine rate limits, which would have been much more difficult before. So maybe I have a rate limit on some podcast routes where if you're a VIP customer, again, this runs after authentication, so I can check the user. I could say if you're a VIP customer, you don't have a rate limit at all, limit none. all other customers, you can hit this 5 times per minute. And then I'm using this new by method to specify any arbitrary piece of data that I want to segment the rate limit by. So 5 hits per minute by the request IP. So each IP can hit these routes 5 times per minute. Okay, so having this closure and having access to the request gives you so much flexibility in terms of how you define these rate limits for your application. And I can even define a list of rate limits that should apply for this name. So I called this one nested because I'm returning 2 rate limits, and it will pass through each one in order. So in this case, I have a general rate limit of 100 per minute, and then I have a 3 per minute by the email address on the request input. So this is, again, a good example of something like a login form. I want to limit it to 3 requests per minute per email that they're attempting. So you can only attempt each email login 3 times per minute. And then in general, the application only allows 100 logins per minute because maybe my application only has 10 users, and 100 logins per minute would be a sign of malicious behavior. And so I'm going to limit it that way. All right. So I've actually got this assigned to a route, throttle nested, so I can show you how this works. So now if we hit this nested route, you can see we hit the route, the email null check is kicking in. And then if I hit like email Taylor, nested, 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 then we got rate limited 3 times. Now, if I change this email to something like Ian, you can see now we get through 2, 3, then rate limited. So it makes it really easy to build these customized rate limiters based on their request, based on information about the user. Maybe they're subscribed to a higher level plan in your application, so they get more requests per minute. Very easy to do those kinds of checks with this new robust rate limiting feature in Laravel 8. All right, and again, this is fully backwards compatible. There's no breaking changes in any of this. All of your existing rate limiting stuff in the throttle middleware will continue to work as normal. All right, exception handling. This is, again, kind of an optional improvement. You do not have to change anything about your exception handling in Laravel 8, but we have tweaked this a little bit in terms of how you can listen for custom exceptions, report on custom exceptions, render views based on custom exceptions. And in the exception handler for Laravel 8, there's just a single register method. And this is very similar to the event listening stuff I showed you earlier, where if you want a custom logging logic for an exception, you can just call this reportable and then pass it a callback that type hints the kind of exception you want to customize. And this will automatically register a custom reporting callback for you. So this is called anytime that exception is thrown in your application. And then I can use the stop method to stop all other reporting features built into Laravel. If I didn't call this, it would do the standard exception logging that would normally happen. So you might have, in previous releases of Laravel, you might have got the exception in your report method and then done something like if e instance of app exception, do this. If e instance of some other exception, do something else. I didn't really like all those if instance of checks, all of that. So I just wanted this really clean, fluent, sort of expressive syntax for doing this. And again, you can still use the old way of doing things with the report and render methods, but this is a new way that I think is kind of slick and convenient. So let me clear out my log. And if I hit this, I'm just throwing this app exception, and I want to show you that we get this custom exception caught log message, and then we stop propagation of that logging. So if I hit this exception route, you can see that custom exception caught got written to the log. So I logged it in this custom way. And then I also had a renderable callback. So if I want to render a custom view for a specific exception, I can say this renderable, type hint the exception, and then return any response I want. Could be a view, could be a full response like I'm doing here. In this case, I'm just returning custom exception, which you can see we got here. Now, of course, if I comment all this out and hit this route, we're going to get the default exception screen. In this case, we've got debug mode turned on, so we see all kinds of other stuff. And then if I turn this back on, we're going to get the custom view. So this is just a quick new way to handle exceptions and define their logging and rendering behavior. All right. schema dumping. This is a much requested feature for many years in the Laravel world. And so what this is, let me go ahead and refresh my migrations. If we go into, let me close out some of these directories, database migrations, you can see this application doesn't have a ton of migrations, but it looks like I've got, I don't know, maybe a dozen here. And you can imagine as you've built applications, I'm sure you've had situations, I've had situations where you eventually have hundreds of these migrations. Like on Forge, we have many migrations. And those accumulate over time. They're all run individually, but potentially while you're testing or while you're setting up the application, while you're seeding, stuff like that. And people have asked for so long, I wish we could just squash these migrations down into a single file and then just kind of start fresh going forward. You can now do that in Laravel 8, thankfully, using a new schema dump command. And so what this looks like is if I do, let me back out these changes. If I come in here and run Artisan schema dump, now it will generate a schema file in the schema directory called MySQL schema, which has the whole schema for my database sort of in raw SQL form. All right. And if I rerun these migrations, it will, you can see right here, it says loading stored database schema, MySQL schema, load the stored schema, nothing left to migrate after loading that schema, and the database is seeded successfully. All right, so that is how you can generate a schema. Now, you can see I still have all those migrations out there. So what can we do about that? Let's back out those changes. So I can run artisan schema dump -- prune, which in this case, it will get rid of all the existing migrations, dump them into a schema file, and now I can start fresh. So I'll run my migrations. It notices a schema file. It notices there's nothing left after that to run. Now, let's add another migration now after we've pruned it. So let's do artisan make migration, create conferences table maybe. So you can see it made a migrations folder. And now we've got one migration in here. And so now let's rerun the migrations, and you can see it loaded the schema, and then it saw, okay, I still have one migration that hasn't been included in the schema. I'm going to go ahead and run that just like normal. So it's really slick. You can prune down all your existing migrations and then just sort of keep going forward. And then maybe when you get like, maybe you accumulate 50 more, you schema dump again and get it updated. And the schema is never loaded. The schema file is never loaded in your production environment. It's only something that would use in your local environment or during development, because you have to think, you would of course commit this file to source control, but when you deploy and you run migrate, it's always just going to migrate forward. It's never going to, it's going to run the migrations you've created from that point on. This is something that's only going to be used during development, maybe while you're doing your database seeding, you're running your unit test, you're setting up a new machine. It's going to use that schema file to build the database up to that point, and then it's going to migrate forward from that point forward. So really nice. And this is supported by MySQL, Postgres, and SQLite. So those three databases. We probably need a little help from the open source world getting SQL Server support. I don't have a SQL Server, but if you're using MySQL, Postgres, or SQLite, you can start using this feature in a couple of weeks when Laravel 8 is released. Again, a very highly requested feature, maybe one of the most highest requested features over the years of building Laravel is the ability to prune out all those old migrations that applications just accumulate for eternity. All right, so that is schema dumping. Factories, and I've got to really get cooking here on my time. Factories have been totally rewritten in Laravel 8, and they're so much more powerful. They're so much more enjoyable to work with. They're now class-based, which some other people in the community have done, like Christoph Rumpel has created a class-based factory package. This is similar to that. It has some differences. There's other class-based factory packages. And we've converted this to factory classes in the core, and they just bring a lot of new features that I want to show you that are really nice and robust. So what it looks like is, if I look at my user factory, it actually doesn't look all that much different. It's a class. If I want to have some like after creating hooks, I can put them in this configure method where we configure the factory. But then you can see my definition actually looks very similar to like a Laravel 7 application where it's just returning an array of attributes. So you don't have to upgrade to this structure in Laravel 8, so don't worry. You don't, if you have, 37 factory files, you can keep using the old format in Laravel 8. We have created a new Laravel/legacy factories package that you can include in your application that will make it all work seamlessly. But you can see this new style has a definition method and just returns the array. And I have access to Faker just like I did in previous releases of Laravel. And that's sort of my default attributes for this user class. All right. And so the user model has a new has factory trait, which allows me to do this user : factory to get an instance of that factory. That's going to use some convention to say, okay, this is a user model. Probably there's a class called user factory that corresponds to this model. Let's use that as the factory. And then, of course, many of the methods are the same, like create. This will create a new user in the database, which I'm going to rebuild my database so that it's fresh. Let's hit this factory route. And you can see we get a user, which is some fake data. If we want to create 10 users, we can say user factory times 10 create. If I hit this route, now we've got 10 users. Make this a little bigger for you. If we want to override some attributes, many times you use a factory and you want to pass attributes that you want to specify that shouldn't be fake data. This works just like previous releases of Laravel, where I pass an array to the create method, and this should create a user that has my name instead of the sort of stub generated name. So that's pretty much the same as before. And then factory states. So in Laravel 7, since everything was sort of closure based, and you couldn't define methods, we had to have this factory state concept, and you had to define them sort of separately from the factory. In Laravel 8, you can just make these methods right on the factory class. So on my user factory, this isn't user, this is post. On my post factory, of course, I have my definition here, and then get rid of that dump. And then I have this method called with_status that accepts a string status. So I can have full IDE assistance here, type hints, whatever I want. And then this method can do whatever we want it to do. It could attach an after creating hook. But if we just want to update the state of the model, we can just call this state and then override whatever attributes we want. So again, this looks similar to a state definition in Laravel 7. In this case, whatever status you pass, we're going to set as a status attribute on the post. And so now when I call post factory with status draft, this is going to be draft. We're going to mutate the state using the state method, set the status to whatever was passed in here, and then we'll create the post. All right, so you can see status is draft here. So creating states is just as simple as creating a method on the factory class. There's not some separate construct to define these states, and they can do more things than just mutate the state. They could have they could add hooks for after creating or after making or whatever you need to do. All right, so relationships. So relationships in Laravel 7's factories, they weren't like a first party citizen. You couldn't magically add relationships on the factories. You had to sort of manually build out the relationships as you went. This has been greatly improved in Laravel 8. So in this example, I'm going to create a user factory. I'm going to create 3 users, and I'm going to say this user has 3 posts, and then I'm going to mutate the state. And this is kind of an advanced example. Sorry, we had to jump right in here kind of quick. This state this state callback will receive the current attributes for the post and the parent user for the post. So I can mutate the title of the post to have the username dash and then the title of the post that was generated by the factory. Then I will create the users. Hopefully that makes sense. I know that's kind of a mouthful, but I kind of wanted to show you the power of what you can do here. So long story short, this should create 3 users who each have 3 posts, and those posts should have a title that has the parent user's name dash title of the post. All right, so let's hit this relationships method. You can see here's user 1. This user has 3 posts. If we look at one of the titles, you can see the user's name dash the randomly generated post name. All right, here's our second user right here, Elaine King. She has 3 posts as well. And then our final user, Shay, has 3 posts. each with the title having her name dash and then the randomly generated post name. All right, so really easy to add related data just in one factory call. Now, this is sort of a mouthful here, having to say has and then post factory. So there's actually a shorthand here where I can just say user factory, 3 users, has post. This is a magic method that will say, okay, the user model must have a post relationship. So let's use that to create this. So it has 3 posts. And then I can mutate the state right here to do the same thing we did above, where I'm going to prepend the user's name onto the title and then just create it like normal. So if I comment this out, and so it will hit this, it should basically do the same thing. Of course, we have different users this time. There's our first user, 3 posts, each with the title has been mutated. Second user, 3 posts. And then our final user, Miss Beulah, has 3 posts. All right, so that is sort of the shorthand syntax for relationships. All right, so that is has many relationships. So what about the inverse? What about belongs to relationships? So a post belongs to a user. So in this example, I can say post factory, I want 3 posts that all belong to the same user named Taylor Otwell. So this is, again, a magic method called for user. This Laravel is going to say, okay, the post model must have a user method on it that returns a belong to relationship. We'll use that to create the user. We'll override the name with this and then create the post. And then I'm just going to eager load in that user so we can see it. So belongs to, you can see there's my first post. It belongs to Taylor Otwell with a user ID of 20. Okay, here's my second post. It belongs to Taylor Otwell with a user ID of 20. So you can see it belongs to the same user. And there's my third post that, again, belongs to myself. So really easy there to create 3 posts all belonging to the same user. Again, if you were doing this with factories before, you would have had to construct this by hand. You would have had to attach all these relationships by hand, which would be cumbersome. All right, so that's belongs to. What about many-to-many relationships? So in this case, a user can have many roles. A roles can have many users. This is a many-to-many relationship. And maybe we have extra data on the intermediate table in between on that pivot table. So in this case, I can say I'm going to create 3 users, and this has attached. This is the has attached method for using many-to-many relationships. It has 1 role per user. And on the intermediate table, we have an active field that I'm going to set to false. So that is on the role user table. There's an active column right there. All right, so we should see 3 users, each have their own role. Active should be false on each pivot table entry for the role. So belongs to many. Here's a user. There's my roles. 1 role. The pivot data active is 0 for false. Second user, same thing. Third user is also active false. All right, so that's how I can do many-to-many relationships. Now there is also I can also attach callbacks to this, which what I wanted to show you here specifically is you will actually receive the user and the role that was created in the callbacks. Again, this is something that didn't happen in Laravel 7. So it lets you do, if you need to inspect those things in your callbacks, you can do that there. So in this case, I'm creating a role that has 3 users. So it's a single role that has 3 users belonging to it. All right, so if I call that, you can see there's my role, and then there's the 3 users that have been assigned to that role. In this case, we used active, which was its default value of true. All right, so really easy to do many-to-many relationships. And again, I could do the fluent method here, like has users. That would be fine too, but in this case, I was using has attached just to show you the explicit method name. Sequences. So this is something really kind of interesting. Say I want to create 3 users that each have 3 roles, but I want to alternate the value of the active column on each role. So I can use a sequence for this. And so I can say has attached roles times 3, new sequence, active true, active false. And so what happens is each time this is created, it will just go down this list. So the first time will be active true, the next time will be active false, and then it will loop back to the beginning, active true, active false, active true, active false. And so what ends up happening when I call this route is you can see the first role, active 1, the next role, active 0, the next role, active 1, active 0, active 1. So it's a way to alternate attributes. And I could add, some third entry here. Maybe if you had some sort of enum column that you wanted to alternate through a list of values, you can do that with sequences, factory sequences. Makes it really easy to alternate values as things are created. All right. What about morphable relationships? So this is a post that has many comments. The comments is a polymorphic relationship. This works basically the same as any other relationship similar to users and posts. So if I hit this morph route, you can see I get one post that has 3 comments, and you can see that is a polymorphic relationship. So it has app models post, the commentable IDs there. And then I'll do the inverse, where when you do the inverse, you have to give Laravel a little bit more of a clue. So I say, I want 3 comments that belong to one post, and I need to tell it the name of that relationship, or what I'm calling the polymorphic entity, which is commentable. All right, so 1 comment or 3 comments that belong to one post. I can do that really easily there. So there is my comment 1 belongs to this post. And then there are more comments down here that belong to the same post ID 24. All right, I hope this isn't, I hope I'm not losing you here, because I know there's a lot to these new factories and they can do a lot of stuff, but I'm trying to quickly show you some of the power they have here. This is a polymorphic many-to-many. So this is going to show you the shorthand syntax for many-to-manys, and it's also polymorphic. So in this case, I'm going to create 3 posts that each have 1 tag. And tag is a polymorphic many-to-many relationship. So there's a taggables table in the middle between the tags and post tables. All right, if you've never used polymorphic many-to-manys, it's a little bit of a complicated relationship type, but pretty powerful. All right, so morph to many, we created 3 posts that each have 1 tag. You can see here's post number 1. It has 1 tag. And then on that pivot data, there's that taggable polymorphic stuff. A second post and a third post that each have a tag. All right, so all those major relationship types can be easily handled and fluently created using the new factory classes. And then you can even do really funky stuff, like this is an example I came up with from Vapor, where the old factories were really giving me trouble. And I had, in Vapor, you have environments, and then those environments belong to projects, and the environments and the projects belongs to teams. So environments, projects, teams, all the way up the chain. But then sometimes you want to denormalize your data. So on the environments table in Vapor, we actually put the team ID on the environments table, even though we could deduce it from the projects table, just because sometimes it makes your querying a little faster to denormalize that. So I have a good index to get like all the environments for a team, for example. Now, in the environment factory, I can do really cool stuff. Since this is a class, I can just add my own helper methods to this factory. And so what I wanted to do is say, I want this environment to belong to a project. So I'm going to get the project ID, and then I want the team ID to be the same team ID that the project belongs to, because I don't want the team ID and the project ID's team ID to be mismatched. And so what I did was use the once helper from the Spotsy once package to create a project only once for this factory, per generation, you might say. And so I create the project, I assign the project ID, and then I can use that same thing to assign the team ID, and it will have the same, use the same project both times, which is really cool. So what I wanted to show you there is just how when you convert factories to classes, you can add your own methods, you can have more powerful features than we had just when they were callbacks. So in this case, I've got an environment here that belongs to project ID 1, a team ID 1, and you can see that matches the team ID on the project as well, or on the environment. All right, and there's the other environment there. All right, so that is factories. I think there's probably more features I could have showed you here, and we'll be sure to get this all documented before September 8th so that you can really dig into this. And of course, as I mentioned before, github.com/legacy factories, Laravel/legacy factories. This is a package that you can include in your Laravel 8 application to provide support for the previous generation of factories. So I really didn't want people to be forced to upgrade every factory and every application they have to use Laravel 8. So all you do is pull this in and just keep on rolling, building your application. And then if the 2 factories are not totally incompatible, so if you want to convert them slowly, maybe you convert some of your factories and then convert the rest later, you can do that. You just include this in your application. All right, so that is the code stuff I wanted to show you in Laravel 8. Now there's a whole nother thing I want to show you. I'm probably going to go over my time, but I'll just keep on trucking here. A few weeks ago, I teased a new thing called Laravel Jetstream. And in previous releases of Laravel, we have had authentication scaffolding. All right, so I've got a Laravel 7 project here. And it looks like this. I'm sure you've seen it. You can log in, you can register, and when you log in, you end up on some sort of basic dashboard. And basically all you can do here is log out, but it sort of gives you this starting point. And this belongs to the Laravel /UI package on GitHub. And it's built using Vue and Bootstrap 4. And this has been around for years. And it's always bothered me that Laravel did not have an authentication scaffolding, and sort of just a scaffolding in general that I felt like is how I would actually start an application in 2020. This felt very sort of out of date. For one, even the Vue stuff is not really how I would set up Vue in a production application. It's not how I set up Vue in Laravel Vapor. The CSS framework, of course, Tailwind is the sexy hotness in the Laravel world right now. So I would probably choose Tailwind instead of Bootstrap. People are doing things with the tall stack, the Tailwind, Alpine, Livewire, Laravel stack, or maybe the what's it called? The lit stack, Laravel, Inertia, and Tailwind. And I would choose a different stack for this. This isn't what I would use. And so Laravel Jetstream is an all new scaffolding for Laravel. And it goes beyond just the authentication scaffolding, but we'll start there. So it is a free package. It's going to be an open source package. This is not paid or commercial or anything like that. So what it looks like, so I'm going to go to the Laravel. I've got it installed here. All right. And this is a brand new scaffolding built on Tailwind UI. And the backend options are pretty interesting, which I'll get into here in a second. So this is the Jetstream landing page. I'll log out. Everything just looks a lot better. The login screens look better. Everything has been improved using Tailwind and parts of Adam's Tailwind UI, a premium package for really nice Tailwind components that are hand built by the Tailwind team. So everything looks really great. And of course, some of the UI inspiration comes from Vapor as well, because we learned a lot building Vapor. So when I install Laravel Jetstream, what about the backend? What is this using, or what about the front end tech stack? Is this using Vue? Is this using Livewire? And so what I wanted to do is, there are two great stacks, I feel like, for building front end stuff in Laravel right now, or dealing with the front end. Livewire, which is built by Caleb Porzio. And so when you install Jetstream, what I can do here, so I'll go into this Jetstream app, Artisan Jetstream install Livewire. And this will install a Livewire version of Jetstream. All right. And it works great. But what if I really like Vue? I really like Inertia. I didn't want to leave any of these technologies out because I love them both a lot. So you can do Jetstream install Inertia. So there's two options for running Jetstream. You can either run on the tall stack, so-called, with Laravel, Alpine, Livewire, and Tailwind, or you can run with Vue and Inertia. If you just love Vue, I still love Vue. I think it's super productive on the front end. And then use Inertia for your backend routing, which we saw Jonathan Rennig talk about a few talks ago. And then, of course, the same Tailwind front end. And you cannot distinguish them. The front ends look exactly the same. They behave exactly the same. It just comes down to your preference. And do you want to work with Blade and Livewire, or do you want to work with Vue and Inertia? So both options are shipping out of the box. This will launch basically with Laravel 8 as a free package. Now, let's dig a little bit deeper into this. All right. So I'll use the Livewire version to show you this here. All right. Let me go into this Jetstream app. And I want to show you a couple of things here. All right. So we've logged in. Now, in the previous authentication scaffolding, all you could do here was basically see this screen and log out. In Jetstream, we have added new features to this to get you started even faster. So there's now a profile screen where your user can do really basic things like update their name, update their email address, set a profile photo. And if you don't want profile photos, you can come in here and disable this feature just by commenting it out. Okay, that feature's been disabled. All right. And if I hadn't set a profile here, it would be like a just my initials. But I've already set a profile photo, so it's still going to show there. All right. So I can enable that feature again. This is built using Livewire. Everything has been fine-tuned on the UI. Really nice saved indicators that smoothly fade out. We can update our password. All the error and validation stuff is taken care of for you. I wanted to give you a better starting point for getting started building your application that somewhere between, Spark and the UI stuff that we had in Laravel/UI, something to get you a little further along. So you can update your password, two-factor authentication built in, taken care of, no setup required. I can just enable it. It even handles recovery codes. I can cycle those, scan the QR code, and then I'm using two-factor authentication. This is using Google Authenticator. In this case is what I usually use on my phone. And then, of course, I can log in using these recovery codes, rotate them, whatever I need to do. And then I'll refresh this page. You can see it's enabled. I can show the recovery codes. This is all Livewire. It feels like I'm using a Vue app. Everything is so smooth. Everything is so seamless. It does not feel like I'm using Blade and Laravel only with basically zero JavaScript. I can disable two-factor authentication. I can view my other browser sessions for this application. So let's open up a private tab and go to Jetstream. And let me log in another session here. All right, so now I've got another session. I'll switch back to here and refresh, and you can see I've got another browser session there that's active. It shows me the IP address, what the browser is, and I can log out those other sessions. Maybe I'm scared my password got hacked, whatever. I want to log out the other devices. This is a modal window using Livewire, really smooth. Type in my password, it logs out those other sessions. Nice little indicator there. And then, of course, I can delete my entire account if I want to. Really nice modal windows inspired by Tailwind UI built right in. And the sick thing about this, these components that you see, these buttons, these modals, you can use these for your own stuff. So like if I go into this Jetstream app, all of these views are exported for you into resources views. So like profile, here's the delete user part. Okay, so this is exported into your app. You can take full control of this. You own this code. I didn't want to hide anything from you. Everything's just exported and then you just take it from there. We just sort of get you started. And the really cool thing is, if you want to use, like, for example, there's that danger button. These are Blade components that we ship with this. You can use it. You can customize it. You can not use it, whatever you want to do. But the cool thing I want to show you, these modals, these are included with Jetstream. So this is a confirmation modal. That's kind of a dangerous action. It has its own props. So we tell it when we want it to show based on which Livewire variable do we want this modal to show. And then we just fill in our slots. And that's it. We fill out our wire click delete user. And now when I click this, it all works automatically. Super smooth, seamless modals with zero JavaScript shipping in Laravel Jetstream, and it's so easy to use. And the same thing on inertia. If I use the inertia option, let me show you. All those pages are exported right there. So profile, delete user form. They correspond one-to-one, an inertia version and a Livewire version. And you can see there's the confirmation modal. Again, we ship these modals. You can use them in your own applications. You can build your own modals. You don't have to use our stuff. And then again, all those buttons, danger button, there's the inertia version. It looks and feels exactly the same. You cannot tell them apart based on which version you're using. You just pick your stack and start going. And it's all available for free. Now, there's more to Jetstream. Let me show you a couple more things before I wrap up. I'm going to go into config Jetstream. We just released a new API package a few months ago called Laravel Sanctum that is sort of a lighter version of Passport. It lets you authenticate mobile devices, issue personal access tokens, handle scopes, all of that. I can just turn that on here. Features API. Add that to my features array. I'm going to refresh the page. I have a new entry here called API tokens. This is integrated with Sanctum, first party, nice cohesive integration. I hit that API tokens drop, I can make tokens. So I can create, my application. I can create a token. It gives me the token. And now I can use that to authenticate with this application's API. When you install Jetstream, it automatically configures the guards, everything to use Sanctum correctly. Everything's ready to go. I can update the permissions on this token using the nice modals we're used to. and I can delete that token. Now, I can define these permissions right in the Jetstream service provider. So I'm going to show you in a little bit. I have all these permissions right here: create, read, update, delete. They're kind of like OAuth scopes, and you can create. I might change these if I was building Forge to like server create or whatever, something like that. All right, so that is the API feature of Jetstream. And I know I'm moving kind of fast, but there's one more thing I want to show you. Let me go to Artisan Jetstream install Livewire -- Teams. All right, so what we've basically done is taken all of the non-billing features of Spark and made them free in Jetstream. All of the stuff that doesn't relate to subscriptions, like the team management, the API stuff, the profile management, that's all been moved to Jetstream, totally open source, totally free in the next couple of weeks. All right, so now I'm going to go to my config Jetstream, and I have this new Teams feature entry. All right, and if I refresh this, you can see I can manage teams, create teams, switch teams. So if I go to my team settings, you can see I can add team members, I can list my team members, and they can have roles even. So if I go into my Jetstream service provider, I can define these roles right here: role admin, what permissions belong to an admin; role editor, what permissions belong to an editor. I can assign a little description to them. Then I can say, okay, when I create an API token, these are the default API token permissions I want there to be. And then when I come to this screen, it lists out those roles. You can see I've already got Adam here. That's the default avatar. If you don't have a profile photo updated, I can update his role to editor using the nice modal windows, and boom, we're good to go. I can create a new team. For example, I can create my other team, create that team, and then I can switch between the teams, which what that does is there's a current team relationship off of your user when you're using Jetstream that you can use to access the user's current team. So let me show you how we can use this. So I switch to my other team. So now let's come into our code and let's look at maybe this dashboard view. Let's say dashboard, let's edit it to make sure we're in the right file. So here's the dashboard. So what we could actually do here is something like auth user current team name. All right, let's put that in parentheses. All right, so right now we're viewing my other team through that current team. If I switch to my Taylor's team, you can see it updates. So that's how you can determine what team is the user currently using. Now, there's all sorts of other things we can do, like check team permissions. So when I installed that with team support, when I installed Jetstream with team support, I got a team model. And that gives me access to various things like, user. I can have this has team permissions method where I can check which permissions a team user has, all of that good stuff from Spark. It's all been kind of ported over, improved, polished up based on what we did in Jetstream, or what we did in Laravel Vapor, and brought into Jetstream so that it's all available to you for free. All right, and so this will be launching and documented along with Laravel 8, if not the same day, within the week or two after Laravel 8. So what about Spark? So what we're doing is transitioning Spark to only handle the billing stuff of your application. All the other stuff has been made free and ported into Jetstream. Spark has been updated as well. One of the downsides to Spark in the past has been that you had to use the same front-end stack that Spark used. And so we got so many emails. I don't want to use Bootstrap with my Spark application. I want to use Tailwind. I don't want to use Vue. I want to use React, or I want to use Livewire. You can use Spark. Spark does not care anymore what front-end tech you are using in your own application. So we've taken some inspiration from what some people like Stripe and other people have done, and we're going to build a billing portal that is separate from the main part of your application. All right, so what this looks like, let's assign the billable trait here. Spark billable. And now we should be able to visit the billing route. Okay, this is a very early version of Spark. It will not come out exactly when Laravel 8 is released. It will probably come out a little bit later. But you can see there's a new billing screen where we can manage all of our subscription stuff. This is using Paddle instead of Stripe. We'll probably ship support for both. So if you use Paddle, we're opening up Spark to hundreds of more countries around the world. What that also gives us is if I click Update Payment Method, let that load a little bit. ooh, never seen it this slow. We can now support PayPal in Spark using Paddle. You can localize your prices based on region, so you can have location-specific pricing. Everything is really smooth using Tailwind UI, yearly, monthly prices. And then I can just, when I'm done managing my subscription, maybe view my receipts, I can return back into the main application. So it's very similar to the Stripe billing portal that they launched a few months ago, except this is Spark and it's a separate page as own compiled assets. It's not like all entangled into the rest of your app, so that on Spark, we can use whatever front-end tech we want. It doesn't affect your application. You use whatever front-end tech you want over here. Livewire, Inertia, doesn't matter. Your CSS doesn't matter. We ship our own CSS with Spark. Okay, so that's going to be coming later this year, this fall. It only handles that billing stuff. All the other stuff has been ported into Laravel Jetstream, and it's going to be free. And I can't wait for you to get your hands on it. I think it's going to give you a sick starting point for building modern Laravel applications in 2020 with Tailwind UI, Livewire, or Inertia and Vue. And it comes out in a few weeks. So that's my presentation. Hopefully you enjoy it. And I'll be in the Discord the rest of the day chatting about it. And you can ask me any questions you want. Thanks.
Woo! That was awesome. That's like solved like 20 of my personal pet peeves. So I think you just like took my list and just went down it. So that was great.
That's what I'm here for. Ian Landsman, we're solving his problems.
Woo, there we go. It was awesome. All right, man. Thanks. I'm going to keep rolling here because we have stuff to do.
All right. Bye.
Bye.